Just to let you know what's going on here, this, if you don't recognize it, there's a Toyota Prius. And those little green icons you can see there is the energy that I've made, generated either slowing down or going down hills. And instead of throwing away momentum in the brakes, it's recovered it into a battery. Now the hybrid battery is not very big, but it's been charged up and run down and charged up and run down. So it's been charged up and run down many times. Each time it's given back its energy, giving the benefit of being a much bigger battery. And obviously this is 5-minute intervals, and as you can see, it's just gone on to the next interval. As you can see, average miles per gallon once the car was fully warmed up was over 75 miles per gallon, and that's an impressive feat when you consider that the car is full of junk. And you know what else? Because I tend to go places that are a bit off-roady, like here as it happens, I got rid of the useless eco donuts it comes with, and I put it on Michelin Cross Climate tyres, which is a mild off-roading tyre, all-weather off-roading tyre. And so the fact that it's done that on these tyres is actually quite impressive. Outside temperature is 19 degrees C, overcast now, it was sunny, and total miles per gallon is over 60, which is not bad for a decent 5-seater car with a 0 to 60 time of 10 seconds. Put it this way, this thing goes 0 to 60 quicker than an Audi A4 2-litre turbo diesel. Not a lot of people realise that. They don't realise just how it really is the world's fastest economy car, a Toyota Prius. This is the standard Mark II model, which is the car everyone thinks of when you mention the words Toyota Prius. Now the classic, the one that kind of was really where it became famous. The later Mark III and the Mark IV that's now current production do even better. Each car is said to be 10% more efficient than the one before it. That is not a bad achievement for a car that's 2 generations old. And there's, unlike the diesels, there's no cheating on emissions. And it's amazing, they get diesel fuel economy out of a petrol engine. And if I was sitting in traffic now, the engine would have been running, it would have been burning fuel. The fact of the matter is the ignition is not off. You see the car moves when I push the accelerator. When I select a gear and push the accelerator, that's reverse with the reversing camera, and then that's forward again just on the old reverse there. You know, that's back with the reversing camera, and that's back forwards. So the car is live. This is how it would be. This is the configuration it would be if I was sitting in traffic. And it's so sitting in traffic jam, it would be burning fuel. This one isn't. Everything, the power steering, the brakes, it's all powered by electricity, which means you haven't got loads of junk hanging off the side of the engine, all driven by rubber belts. You know, these things, as it happens, these rubber belts, you know, these things wear out. You know, they're a pain. You don't have these on the Prius. You don't have them 3rd and 4th generation Prius. You don't have them on this car. There was only the one. You know, these damn things snap. It's the most unreliable component on a car. And so, you know, not having these things means that your car is the least likely to let you down. The fact that so many of the accessories are electrically driven and solid state sealed like the power steering means that maintenance, these things have officially the lowest maintenance cost of any second-hand car on the market. Comparable second-hand car. And the nice thing is, because the power steering and the power assisted brakes only work when you actually need them, rather than being powered by a power steering pump and a power brake pump normally running all the time on the engine. On a conventional car, these pumps spin all the time, driven by these belts. So of course the bearings in those pumps only get lubricated once when they're made, 10 years later they're starting to go wrong. On an old car, you're starting to spend money on things like water pumps and fuel pumps and power steering pumps and alternators and starter motors and all these things that are bolted to the side of the engine. They get covered in crap and dirt, and the crap gets in the bearings and the seals wear, and it all just turns into an unreliable nightmare. You don't have that problem with these, because everything is in sealed boxes, like the compressor in your fridge. The air conditioning is like the compressor in your fridge. It's timed out another 5 minutes. It's like when you have a fridge, you got the air compressor in it, it's electrically powered. Unlike normal air conditioning, which is driven by a belt from the crankshaft, there's no crank seal to wear. Where the shaft goes into the air compressor pump, there's a seal. That seal invariably starts to leak in an old car, so you need to have your air conditioning constantly regassed. That's another expense you don't get with a Prius. It's everything is like the compressor in your fridge. It's a solid state unit powered by electricity. You know, think of your central heating pump. You know, that could go for 15 years and it does a lot more hours per day than a water pump in a car. You know, again, it's a solid state electrically powered unit. There's much less to go wrong. Same with the air conditioning. It's just like the compressor in your fridge. The brakes are powered by the same sort of thing. It's just a solid state compressor that hasn't got any mechanical shafts and belts going onto it, so the whole thing can be totally sealed inside, and if you were to take one apart, the parts inside would be as shiny and as new as the day it was made, even on a car that's 200,000 miles and 15 years old. The hybrid drive really looks after the engine. The car is actually an electric car. The engine, it just provides energy to keep the battery to power the motor. It's rather like a diesel electric locomotive, and you know, you look how long those last. The point is, the engine is cosseted by the hybrid drive. You cannot thrash the engine in a Prius because you actually don't have any control over it, because your accelerator pedal is actually connected to an electric motor. Significantly, what that means is that they're never laboured, they're never thrashed, and when you start one of these things up, the engine runs under light load, and it tends to take more from the battery again to protect it, and the battery will kind of run down to below the normal average, and then it'll work its way back up again. How these things budget their energy is the battery is kept roughly at 60%, and you see there, and if there's more of that energy in the battery, it very generously uses the battery. But if there's less energy in the battery, it tends to use the engine. That's how it kind of balances the battery bank account. And so you don't have to worry about it. And you've got this rather fancy diagram again. Let me put the car into gear. Oh, it's gone into reverse. That's forward. You see the arrows. I'll go backwards because I'm about to drive off the end of this thing. So let me go backward. Let me go forward. You see, you drive forward, you got the arrows. It's all coming from the battery. If I was travelling faster, the engine would be running. You get all these arrows going on, telling you what's going on. And let's back up a bit. And I was about there, wasn't I? I'm just getting back in position. I need to put the car here so I can open my lorry container door and swing it open. And but yeah, you cannot thrash a Toyota Prius. You just can't. So that means that the engines last very, very well. I've once took apart a Toyota Prius engine that had been accidentally poisoned. It had got fuel in it for an old-fashioned peanut oil engine rather than a car. Somebody put the wrong tank of, you know, a jerry can of fuel in, and it was like putting sugar in the tank. It gummed up the piston rings, it gummed everything up. Took the engine apart to clean it. The engine had done 110,000 miles, and you could not see any wear whatsoever on any of its bearings. It was absolutely like they were brand new. Normally at over 100,000 miles, bearings are relatively cheap. You would replace them as a matter of course. It wasn't necessary. They were absolutely pristine. And that's because the engine is cosseted by the hybrid drive. You know, normally when you start a car, the starter motor spins the engine over, and before the engine is going fast enough for the fuel pump to cut in, the engine fires up, and it has to lug itself up to speed, cold, with no oil in the bearings. That's when most of your wear and tear starts. In one of these, the engine is spun up to normal idling speed. They open all the valves, the intake and exhaust valves, so there's no mechanical load on the crank. Everything is spinning, the oil pump is spinning. They then shut the valves, turn on the petrol, and it just starts up just like that. And let me see if I can get the engine to run by putting it into gear and putting my foot down. And yeah, the engine is now running. Engine is off. Engine is now running. Engine is off. These things are designed to stop and start their engines all the time, so they had to solve the issue of engine wear on starting. These things don't have the usual engine wear on starting problem. It's another very good reason for considering a Prius as a second-hand car. In terms of reliability and expectation of life, I would say that a 200,000 mile Prius will be a more reliable bet than a 50,000 mile car with the old-fashioned conventional engine layout with all the bits and pieces hanging off the side of it, different by all these blasted belts. It's a vastly superior arrangement. If you buy a Prius and it looks in good condition and everything is shiny and sparkly and well cared for, and the engine starts up all right, basically so that it proves they've been changing the oil, you know, having it serviced, that's all you need to worry about. You know, you've basically got a car where, thanks to all the solid state technology, it'll basically last forever. And if you are unlucky enough to blow a box of electronics under the bonnet, it's dead easy to change. You know, you can change the battery in one of these things. The hybrid battery, it's 6 bolts holding the battery in and 2 for the connections, and any battery will swap into these cars. There's no special coding or any of that nonsense. You can just buy it and drop it in, and because the hybrid batteries generally don't fail, they are 10 a penny second hand. It's a very cheap fix. So you know, the electric drive system in this does the same job as a gearbox in an old-fashioned car, and changing a gearbox is a specialist job. It's not 6 bolts plus 2 connections. It's a major job, and therefore requires a garage. And I remember spending a 4-figure sum repairing the gearbox in my son's car, and it only went at 60,000 miles, and that was a Volkswagen based design. And you know, we couldn't have done it ourselves. We don't have the specialist equipment. You can change a hybrid battery one of these without specialist equipment. In fact, the most of the time you spend is taking all the trims off. The hybrid battery is kind of in the boot floor, and most of the time it's taking all the boot trims off to get to it. Because it's just boxes of electronics that just plug in, it's actually a very easy car to fix when something goes wrong. It even tells you what's wrong. The OBD1, there's a plug under the dashboard that tells you that you plug your a standard laptop in and a bit of software and a cable you can buy on eBay. It tells you what's wrong, and sometimes it even tells you on the screen there what's wrong, and you just replace the bit that's playing up. And even if the hybrid battery does fail, it just starts to behave like a conventional automatic car. The car still runs. Having 2 engines means that if one of the engines fail, either the electric motor or the piston engine, the other motor will get you out of trouble. If the petrol engine fails, the motor will get you a couple of miles to the nearest safe area, so you're not stranded in the middle of a roundabout. And if the electric motor or hybrid battery fails, the petrol engine will get you, under certain circumstances at significantly reduced power, you'll be able to get yourself away from the problem area and into a safe area. You can park the car under a street light. It's not somewhere where you don't want it to be. Yeah, I'm aware of one story. They tried to hijack a Prius owner. They threw it. This was in a bad area in America, dark district, and they threw a concrete block into the road. The car struck the concrete block. It ripped the bottom off the engine. It smashed open the crankcase. Oil went everywhere. The dashboard lit up like the proverbial Christmas tree. The guy put the power on, and although he didn't have a lot of power, he made it 2 miles to a major chain petrol station, one of the big ones, the big kind of automotive service area, motorway service area type places, and made it to safety. And that was thanks simply by the fact that he had one of these. So yeah, once you've had one of these, you kind of come to the conclusion you're never going to drive anything else. I mean, I could have been sat in traffic with this. Everything's live. I can even have the air conditioning on. There you go. There's the air conditioning on, and air conditioning on. I can be sat outside the school waiting for the kids, and the air conditioning's on, and I'm not belching out fumes because I don't need the engine to power the air conditioning. It's powered by the hybrid battery, so there's cold air coming out now, and the engine's off. You see these people sitting outside the school waiting for the youngsters. They're either running the engine and chuffing out fumes that's percolating across where all the little ones are running about, or you have to sit here and bake in an absolute glass house of a car and fry, because running the engine continuously is expensive and polluting. Running an engine with no load on it is a very inefficient way of burning petrol. It really doesn't burn well at all, and that's where you get most of the emissions. So having the engine stop when you don't need it, just simply relying on the hybrid battery, is all you need. Eventually, if I sat here long enough, that battery would drop down a few bars, the engine would cut in, it would run for about a minute, top it up again, and then the engine would cut out. It really is an incredibly efficient way of sitting in a traffic jam, and of course it's an lovely car to drive. It's as smooth as a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. You cannot beat the smoothness of an electric motor, the effortless smooth. There's my camera, you can probably see the scenery moving. You know, I mean, look at that. You cannot get a smoother, more pleasant drive. And the precise control, there's no clutch to wear out. You're not wearing a clutch out. But the electric, there is no clutch. It's basically an electric motor turning the wheels via a pair of cogs. When the gearbox in a car fails, it's not the gears that fail, it's all the clutch bit and the gear change and all the clutter that you need to change gear. It's the equipment that you use to change gear that fails. It's not the actual gears themselves that fail. This car doesn't have a gearbox as such. Oh, I'm getting cold. Turn it off. And it's not the gearbox that fails. It's all the clutter that goes with it. The gear change shifter, the clutch pedal, the clutch cable, the clutch release bearing, the clutch plates itself, all of that junk. You don't have that on these. It's just a solid state motor with one moving part turning a small cogwheel that turns a big cogwheel that turns the wheels. It's basically like an electric train, and those trains go for decade after decade after decade. Even trains that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, go decade after decade after decade. It is just, there is no inherent reason why anything should fail. You haven't got drive belts and pulleys and bearings that don't get lubricated because they're outside the engine, not in the oil supply, and all that clutter that goes wrong. You know, you could not have a better car as a second-hand choice. Toyota have stolen it. I know people like Jeremy Clarkson and all of that are probably being slipped to backhanders by the car industry, saying if you slag off the Prius, we'll give you a Maserati kind of thing. I know that goes on. I know that goes on for a fact. The truth of the matter is, this car is a vastly better vehicle than the car industry, and they're sucking up to the car industry motoring journalists would ever want to admit. It's a brilliant piece of engineering, and it really doesn't have any particular reason to go wrong. The engine is really well looked after by the hybrid drive. The hybrid drive was massively over-engineered because Toyota wanted it to be reliable, and they wanted it to be reliable so that they could use it in the Lexus. They use the same system in the Lexus. That's their top of the range Mercedes, Rolls-Royce beating car. The Lexus is basically a Toyota, thoroughly upmarket Toyota. They use the same drive system. Now, I really, you know, that basically says it all. So as I come up to 20 minutes, I think I've gone on enough about this car. That'll do, I think.